Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Naimeka Ugu. If this is your first time, please kindly subscribe and turn on the notification button just so that when I upload my videos, you get to see them. We talk about everything and anything about medical, practice, and lifestyle.
Nigeria is a country with over 200 million people.
Yeah.
As we speak, we have less than 4,000 radiographers serving 200 million people. And out of that 4,000, over 2,500 may probably be out of the country. So leaving us with 1,500 radiographers to service 200 million people. You're welcome.
All right, sir. It promises to be a very quick one and not waste your time. I understand you're a very busy person, and getting you to be a part of this conversation was a Hercules task.
I can say that again.
It's all right, sir. Do you mind introducing yourself to us, Prof?
Okay. My name is Professor Felix Okechukwu Erondu. I'm carrying multiple caps. I'm a professor of radiography at the Gregory University Uturu, and I'm currently the Dean Faculty of Health Sciences, the College of Medicine and Health Sciences of the same university. I also double as the medical director and CEO of Image Diagnostics Incorporated. It's a multi-facility, multi-station, multi-location medical outfit. Interested in medical diagnostics and allied clinical support services.
Oh, wow, it's a lot. We are very pleased to have you, sir. I mean, I was also trying to read more about you, and you have just decided to give us just a little bit of yourself.
That's okay.
Well, I was able to also find out that you have written a lot of books in the past, so that makes you also an author. You also mentor undergraduates and postgraduates as well, and you have over 25 years of clinical experience, and also have really vast experience in ultrasonography and also a medical imaging consultant. That is a lot. We are so pleased.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Can you please tell us a bit of your professional journey about, how far you've come in radiography? A lot of people would see Prof as a very digital gentleman. You come to the younger people as a very down-to-earth radiographer. A lot of people will not know how far you've come, over the years. You mind telling us about your professional journey?
Okay, well, I've come a long way. I think I'm a mixture of the old and the new, as a matter of fact. I started my professional journey as a university lecturer. Shortly after graduation, way back in the early 1990s.
Okay.
I graduated from the University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, and then shortly after that, I came back to do postgraduate. Probably one of the first. As a lecturer, I started out as a lecturer with the University of Nigeria shortly after my postgraduate, way back in the early 90s. And then I continued with the university system up until about 1997, when it became obvious that I needed to try my hands on something else. So I started combining lecturing and private clinical practice. And then I combined for a while. I had short stints, several times and in outside the country. And then I was combining all of this. Then when it became too difficult for me to combine a full-time medical practice and full-time academics, I opted to go for a part-time with the academics, and while I continued on the full-time with my clinical practice and trying to build up our business. And then that continued for quite a long time, spanning a period of about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And having established what I would say a foothold on the professional and business landscape, I opted again to go back to full-time academics. While I now do part-time business and full-time academics.
Yeah,
it's been a mixture of both, if you ask me. So, currently I now teach as a full-time professor, and then I still do my business on the side. I sit on the board as the MD and the CEO of my clinical organization. Yeah.
Oh.
At some points, I've had opportunities to also lead in the corporate governance sector. For instance, I was once the chairman of the Radiographers Association Board of Nigeria, which is a regulatory body that regulates licenses and ensures professional integrity of radiography as it is. So I've sat on the board of some teaching hospitals. I've also sat on the board of some private organizations, and some of them I still sit on their board, as one member of board of directors of several other organizations. So that's in simplicity what my professional journey looks like.
Oh, wow. Wow, this is quite a journey, and an interesting one at that. You have inspired a lot of young radiographers, and it's really encompassing all of this you've mentioned. They have all formed the basis of why a lot of people look up to you as a role model. So you did mention about having to combine the academics and your business part of the profession. So I was going to ask, which one do you prefer? But I think the question would be, what is the motivation, having to come back to the academics and going back to your business? How do you find it? What motivates you in both of these areas?
Okay, let me say that at the time I graduated in 1992, there was a large lacuna, a huge gap between what we do in the classroom as learned as students and what we see in practice. We are part of students who go to teaching hospitals and watch radiographers do what they do. We read a lot of things about what appeared to be contemporary, as it were, by that time of our experience. And then I saw there was a huge gap between what they teach us in the class and what we actually see is being practiced. Radiography appeared to be very rudimentary, very uninteresting, very demotivating in the clinical settings. but in the classroom, it sounded so interesting.
Yeah.
So there was this mindset to try and discover why there is a difference, and to actually see why what we study is not exactly what is being practiced. And at that time also, quality practice was scalable. Very few people could do ultrasound. In a whole city, you could just see one person who is very proficient in doing ultrasound. And for the most of the bits, they were not basically radiographers. It could just be one radiologist, and they were very few of those kind of radiologists with that kind of experience. So having graduated and done a postgraduate degree in medical imaging and did some specialization in ultrasound, it became obvious that I had a lot of knowledge that needed to be exhibited in the clinical setting. And the classroom was not the perfect location to exhibit the clinical experience, but you could talk all the theory. You want to show that this theory actually works. So that was initially what my motivation was. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to put radiography in the limelight. I wanted to prove a point that having gone through all these levels of knowledge and tutelage, it was possible to actually practice proficiently as a radiographer. And so I ventured into private clinical practice, not because of money, as it were, but because I just wanted something different. I wanted to have the fulfillment to practice as a professional, something that I felt was scarcely available at that time of my experience.
Oh, great. Wow.
Yeah.
Prof, thank you very much. Talking about the profession being interesting, it kind of brought back memories to me now. And then I remember when we were in school and we were going for postings and stuff. I do remember seeing some, radiographers, not really looking so motivated, if that's the word. And then I was wondering in my head, could this be a personal thing or just how the profession is? But you have demystified it, actually. Like I said, a lot of people look up to you as a role model. You have brought in a lot of positivity into the profession. And that would lead me to ask you about your private venture, your business. So I believe you have other, younger people who are radiographers in your organization, either as interns or as corpers or even students. How accessible is it to get them under you in terms of mentorship? Okay. Yeah, so I was saying I really appreciate what you talked about, the radiography practice as being uninteresting at the time. And we actually had instances where we could say we were demotivated by some of our colleagues who weren't looking, like a profession. They didn't carry the outlook of the profession. But here you are demystifying it, and actually a lot of people can testify to that. And I was trying to ask you about your private venture. You did say something about mentorship. So we understand that radiographers, students, interns, and even core members, they are always interested in getting to places where they can learn, where they will be held by their hands and shown the way. So how are you bringing this as well to the younger professionals in terms of mentorship?
Okay, well, mentorship is a relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And so it actually takes a serious and interested mentee to be mentored. As an individual, I kind of have an understanding of what it means to leave school and not have anybody to look up to because you just feel you're probably not in the right place. That was the feeling we had when we started. So for some of us who had managed to overcome that bug, I've tried to create a very natural and welcoming environment for would-be radiographers. My organization is a beehive of activities for students on long and short clinical rotations. My organization is involved in, internship programs. Arguably, I may also be one of the highest employers of graduate radiographers among, similar practices in this country. As we speak, we have over 12 to 15 radiographers under my employment currently. And then we have interns in virtually all our branches. We have students, even as I speak to you now, we have over 15 students at every point in time undergoing one form of tutoring, mentorship as we can. I have also been involved in training, postgraduate trainings for students who are undergoing the PGD programs with the Nigerian Institute of Radiography. I supervise their projects. And then, of course, my core role as a university lecturer is to teach and mentor students. And then, of course, supervise their research and direct them in the pathway. So for me, it's a fulfillment of what I would have desired happen at the time I was leaving school. But we also quite understand the peculiar or nature of situations at that time. Most of the people who were the radiographers at that time had a slightly different pathway in terms of training, orientation, from what we had. So they may not entirely be blamed for what was going on. Yeah. But in our own circumstance, I think we have managed to bridge that gap very significantly.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Prof. I was going to also ask you about the private organizations and businesses in Nigeria proper. So we understand the problem with funding as it is, and how difficult it is for small and medium enterprises to even access loans to start up businesses. Talking about your organization, it is a very robust one. You have an MRI scanner, which is really very enviable. Not a lot of hospitals can afford that. So how were you able to set up your organization in terms of funding? Was there any assistance from the government, or how did you do it?
Okay. Let me go philosophical, and I would say I was assisted by God.
Yeah.
Grace was available to me. Thanks be to God for the opportunity to be able to do that. Now, having acknowledged the ultimate source, I would also say that there's been a significant degree of evolution in business and business models from the time we started and what obtains now. I started very small, you could say from the scratch, going through the first trainings. I didn't get up and just start a practice. I've done postgraduate before I even thought of starting to work. Yeah. And when I worked, I didn't work by starting my own practice. I worked for other people. I set up business for others under their watch, and try to manage that of other people who had set up their own for well over 5 years. When I left the university, and started the part-time practice, I was managing a facility for somebody else, and I did that for about 5 years, working for somebody else, understanding how management is done, how decisions are made, how things work, understanding the challenges of running business. And then I started out small, not looking at, of course, I had the big picture in mind, but we started bit by bit, get a small ultrasound machine, start up with that, grow from there, acquire an X-ray, progress from there, acquire, laboratory, acquire things, bit by bit. We started climbing. But of course, at some point in the course of things, one needed to also access bigger funding, because there are things you cannot do just by your own savings. When we started looking at going into cross-sectional imaging and trying to expand to the big picture, you now need government, rather banking support. And I wouldn't forget my first experience. When I started out, I went to, I won't mention the name of the bank because this could be on air or anything. But the bank refused to even open an account for me, because as at that time, to open a current account, they were taking a minimum deposit of 500,000. I went to another bank, their own was 100,000. And I went to the third bank, their own was 50,000. I'm just saying opening an account. I didn't say take the loan.
Okay.
So and then I settled for the guys with 50,000, with an understanding that I was going to cash the 50,000 immediately after opening the account. So I gathered all my savings, and they made up to 50,000. I used it to open the first account, and then 1 week later, when the account was open, I went and cashed it, because that was still my operating cost, rather my operating capital. So, I mean, it was that basic until we got to where we are. Now it's a bigger picture. You could go to banks and they can finance your services, because they see a potential in what you're doing. And then we can also attract partnership. But now, let me deviate a little bit from where my own pathway to much more easier ways of managing or raising funding for this kind of business. Healthcare business is not an instant profit-making business per se. We first have to see it as service to humanity, service delivery, and then with quality service now comes money. So because of this outlook, and of course the humanitarian background, it becomes a little bit difficult, to make people raise funds that easily. So there are options available to people at this current stage. First is you could do crowdfunding, where a couple of people come together and raise some money and say, okay, we are setting up this. You can also do seed money. Somebody brings out a particular amount of money and say, hey, I'm investing in this thing. When you get the money, you pay me back. You can do a venture capital, opportunities. There are also now huge opportunities for partnership, because during our own time, people didn't even see why they should invest in radiology. Radiology was synonymous with very old and antiquated X-ray machines, rusty and lying along the corridors of general hospitals. So people didn't see any prospect with them. Even radiology as a subspecialty was not interesting. There were very few people who wanted to go and do radiology. But now it's different. The opportunities are there. Government knows that when you talk about investment in the hospital, they're talking about imaging and radiography practice. So it's easier now to get partnerships, people who, politicians, businessmen who have money and want to invest it in something very meaningful. And of course, the banks. Talking about the banks, I'm not sure I would advise a young man wanting to start up business for the first time to go to the bank. It's not an easy route to go, because the banks are not forgiving when it then comes to repayment of loans. Once you've signed and you've gotten the money, you have an obligation to pay. And exactly. So banking should not happen as a first line of option. I will encourage people to explore partnerships, explore venture capitals, explore crowdfunding or some kind of seed money approach for the initial startup before you look out for banking and finance.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Prof, now you mentioned about private partnership. It was one of the things I was going to ask you about private partnership. How exactly is the structure in Nigeria? Because I remember one of the hospitals I did come to train their CT radiographers. It was a public-private partnership sort of arrangement. So it wasn't a teaching hospital, but also partly owned by a private individual. So how exactly, do people get into this partnership, either with the government or with individuals?
Okay. Let me say clearly that government is not a good manager of businesses. What government should ideally do is to regulate the business environment, make it conducive so that private, investors could actually bring their money. When the environment is conducive, then people are easy and happier to find it easier and happier to get their money out. So private-public or public-private partnership is quite novel. I mean, it's something that in an ideal situation should be able to work, because it leaves the option of having the facility or the business managed by private individuals who understand what profit is, who understand what frugality is, and are ready to do the needful. Why government just stays to oversee and take a peep across over the shoulder to know what's going on. But my experience also is that in some instances, some PPPs are not working. And the reason is because of government bureaucracy, undue interference, by agents of state, and policy somersault. Somebody, I give you an instance. Akwa Ibom State government built a multi-billion-dollar hospital and put in, I don't know whether it was 120 something or 200 and something slice CT scan.
Yeah,
was installed. It made news. It was a bang on national telly about bringing the state of the art, and then they got people to manage this thing. But this arrangement was because a particular governor was there and felt that was how he wanted to spend the state money. Okay, next governor comes. He's not interested in continuing the agreement or servicing the terms of agreement. Obviously, the reasons I may not know. It's possible that there may be some underwater current that makes it uncomfortable for an incoming government to embrace what was already there. But the truth is that as we speak, that hospital is lying basically as a waste. Bayelsa State government started something very novel as well. They run an efficient diagnostic facility with state-of-the-art equipment, with a lot of professionalism. Of course, with some foreign investors or whatever kind of private people. Now, that particular government has ended. A new government is in place, and the contract is not running. That facility is shut down. So these are all cases of government, unnecessary government bureaucracy, sometimes undue interference. And then, sorry to say that without meaning to clearly point at anybody, when our politicians engage in policies like PPPs, their main interest is not the normal populace. At heart, that is not what they want to achieve. Either that partnership is done to score a political point, or there is some element of economic gain attached to it that we don't see. So when that has happened with the first government and he leaves, the next government that is coming feels, what is there in this project for me? Machines are working, but what do I get out of this? I'm left with a liability. I have to service this part of agreement. So sometimes they don't feel obliged to continue. So until we begin to do public-private partnerships as service to humanity, as part of our social obligation as a government, to deliver service to our people, then it's not going to work, because when this happens, we will not be interested in what is personal or what we are likely going to gain from the project. We will likely look at the impact, the social impact, the economic impact, the health impact on the people that we govern. So where a PPE is properly crafted, I think it is a very beautiful thing to do. And I would advise anybody who wants to go into a PPE not to sign any agreement that is less than 4 years, meaning it should be able to go beyond the immediate government. So I also bring to your knowledge what happened with Bicotny, company in Lagos, with the Ministry of Aviation. The man brought money, got loans, and built the MM2 Murtala Muhammed International Airport, which most of us saw was something different. It was a revolution based on where we were before, and then a new government is in place. He has not recovered his money, and then they don't want to agree with that terms of that contract. And then they take him to court. The contract is stalled. His monies are not paid. Everything is distorted. So that is a very big discouragement for potential investors that want to do a public-private partnership. I've had my own stint as well, and I had to back out because the government agents, I won't mention the states now, government agents were interested in me paying monies upfront, even though I'm also going to be the one investing in the facility. They are not bringing any money. They are not bringing anything. Just the fact that the government owns locality, and you have to put your facilities there. So when I realized they were interested in what they would get, I said, well, I'm not going to take a bank loan and then take part of that loan and be giving somebody a kickback. I thrive on genuine businesses, so I backed out. So these are some challenges we might face, but if it is properly executed and personal interest is relegated to the background, then it works.
Wow. That's a lot, Prof. I mean, going by all of these challenges and knowing, what business owners really pass through in the country at the moment, I do realize you used to be in England. Was it for academic purposes, or were you working at the time? And now that you've moved to Nigeria, what has changed?
Well, I've always had my eyes on Nigeria all the way. And to be honest, my stints in England were more of a quest for acquiring or rather equipping myself for the task in Nigeria. I've always believed in homegrown solutions. I believe in the in the Nigerian spirit. So yes, it's a bit tough, when you want to pick from the so-called comfort zone and try to come back to a place where you think things are not working. But I look a little bit more into the future. Nigeria is a country with over 200 million people.
Yeah.
As we speak, we have less than 4,000 radiographers serving 200 million people. And out of that 4,000, over 2,500 may probably be out of the country. So leaving us with 1,500 radiographers to service 200 million people. That's a huge opportunity. It's a big opportunity. So the truth is, we can turn our population into gain, by meaning that this is healthcare delivery for 200 and something million people. So it is still a large industry that is, not properly harnessed as we speak.
Yeah.
Most of the diagnostic and medical facilities are located in the urban areas. In the semi-urban and rural areas, there are no diagnostic facilities. There are no laboratories. There are no hospitals. So, and this is where we have a lot of our people. So you could see that there is still a huge gap. So I see a lot of potentials in Nigeria as a country in terms of healthcare delivery. Obviously the gaps that we see, the rots we see in government, the discrepancies we see in the delivery of services is a gap that can be exploited for potential business development. So these were my motivation. So yes, when you are in England, you want to make some little money because it's hard currency. You want to work in very good environment where things are working. But beyond that, what next? You always, look at yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, where are you going to be? If you're working in the NHS, for instance, what is the maximum best that you can be, in the NHS as a radiographer? You probably get to the end of becoming the chief radiographer or some very important person in your trust. But that's the much that you can ever do. And then you grow old and you retire, and you know. So some of us came to England to gather knowledge, to gather skills, to see how things work. And I still do that consistently. After my trip, my stint in England, I've done a couple of other trainings in other parts of the country. I've done some training in Australia. I've done trainings in the US. I've got a degree from the United States as well. I mean, all in the quest to just gather what appear to be the international best practices, bring it into Nigeria. They say in the land of the blind, one-eyed man is a king. So when people are running away, and then you're bringing something that they cannot see here, and then you bring it and come back, obviously you will gain some level of attention. That has been my own approach to the whole thing. But so yes, knowledge was my motivation, as a matter of fact, and that's why I didn't stay too long. As soon as I get what I need, I came back, and I just go and pick up some things and I come back. I'm no longer living in England.
Were you in the NHS?
Yes.
Okay, that's nice. Prof, going into what you just talked about, quality service delivery, how affordable is it for the people who are in rural areas to access quality healthcare, because we can see we don't have your sort of robust healthcare facility in this kind of rural areas, and the government is not even really doing anything much in terms of providing complex machines like MRI or CT scanners in rural areas. So someone that has hemorrhage, for instance, would think about the cost of running an MRI, a CT scan to see what's going on, or someone who has a stroke, would think about the cost of going to a private healthcare organization because they think, it is really expensive there. What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, the thing is, quality healthcare is not cheap, generally. It's not cheap in England. It's not cheap even in the United States. The only thing is that because there is, universal health insurance that allows people to access that care. But if you look at, how the demographics work, you realize that the poor are paid for by the rich. When you're paying your health insurance is kind of tied to your level of income, right? So the poor pay less, the rich pay higher. So they put the resources together and they're able to provide machines, and that both when the poor is sick, he goes there. When the rich is sick, they go there. That's how countries that understand the way governance should be done. That's how it works. The private or pay per pocket or pay, kind of approach will be very difficult to do, especially when you think about CTs and MRIs. Obviously, CTs and MRIs they are secondary care. I mean, they fall within some sort of secondary care. Can we even talk of something basic as an X-ray machine or a basic ultrasound machine, that may not cost so much in terms of infrastructure to put in place? And then from this primary care, we can get a pool of patients that can eventually be funneled towards the secondary care. It doesn't make an economic sense, obviously, for me to set up an MRI and a CT scanner in my village. The first thing is that you don't have the kind of healthcare practitioners within my locality in that village that will understand how to use or utilize the CT, because you need a referral. Patients will not refer themselves for a CT scanner or an MRI scan. And even when they get the result, they need some level of specialization. So things like CT scans, MRIs, yes, can be in rural, semi-rural environment where you also have some level of specialization in terms of care. But primary care, ultrasound and X-ray machines can be in every general hospital, okay? When somebody has persistent headache, for instance, and you've done a skull X-ray, doctor can now say, hey, we can't find anything on this X-ray based on what was reported, so please go to the town and get us a CT scanner or an MRI scan. That's the way it should be. So, and then government also needs to take the issue of health insurance very seriously. The way it is being, there are laws that are being, proposed for amendment of the NHIS Act or bill, but it's still insufficient because it places power more like in the hands of the HMOs who are ready to collect the money, and then they come back to you and negotiate peanuts for you to run the service. And then if you look at it and you're not able to provide that service, so it's not actually adding up. Yeah. And then government needs to come into place, pull individuals together in terms of community-based, faith-based, organization-based, statewide-based, or all sorts of health insurance schemes. Then it becomes easy because people are not going to be paying the huge amount of money from their pocket. The insurance pays for it while they assess care. I think that's the way to go in terms of accessibility for the rural populace.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Prof, we can see that in different parts of the world, there are regulatory bodies and systems. In the UK, for instance, the CQC, they regulate the quality of care being given to the patients for both private and public hospitals. So for anyone going into the medical radiography business or healthcare business in Nigeria, is there any sort of legal requirement, to owning a center or owning a facility, and who regulates what when it comes to quality healthcare delivery?
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I know that Nigeria is a very unique country. As a matter of fact, it's impossible to determine completely all the agencies or interested parties that want to, regulate your business. But let us say the ones that are statutory. Obviously, there is professional regulation, and that means you need to have been qualified as a radiographer and get a license from the Radiographers Registration Board of Nigeria. There is also a requirement that you need to also incorporate. If you're going to run a corporate business and that will require you opening an account, then you need to have a registration with the Corporate Affairs Commission, either a business name or a limited liability organization has to be registered. And then, of course, there are also regulations that now, if you register with CAC, one of the requirements is you have to get a tax ID, meaning you also have something to do with the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, and the tax bodies, depending on whether you're a limited liability or just an enterprise.
Yeah.
So you could deal with the federal or you could deal with the state. Of course, you will also have to register with the Ministry of Health, especially in the states that you operate in. There may be slight differences in a place like Lagos. A farmer seems to be an agency of government of the state that tries to regulate all of this. In Rivers State, where I operate, we don't have a similar body, but the Ministry of Health, through the Directorate of Medical Services, regulates the registration of licenses or licenses, practices, or so to say, different categories of practices, whether it's laboratory or medical, pharmaceutical. So that means you have to register with the state as well. Then, of course, there are local government permits, depending of course, again, on your locality. In places like Rivers State, local government has all sorts of levies and that they will bring for you to pay. The communities will come. It's not statutory, but that's part of corporate social responsibility. They have their own demands you have to also fulfill, sort of providing for local content. Then, because you're doing a radiation-related service, the Nigerian Nuclear Regulatory Agency will, of course, show, because you have to license the sources of radiation. And that's, again, and then it goes on and on. The pension people will come in, the insurance will have to come in because you need to get indemnity. Sometimes you see sanitation. And in fact, I've seen all sorts of people. I've even seen firemen come into my organization to ask for fire certificate. And I asked them to run away from my facility because I don't sell diesel. I run medical services. So there are statutory ones. There are ones you can never imagine. And sometimes there are all sorts of things, signage, local government, environmental, sanitation, just name it. They all keep coming.
Yeah.
They all keep coming. But these other ones are statutory. I mean, in the sense that without them, you would be failing a major aspect of the law. Requirements. So you need to do that. Professional regulation, yes, very, very key. You have to have your license ready. And for some of us, my practice has a bit standardized. We are ISO certified, International Society for Standardization, Organizations for Standardization. So we have ISO 9001 2015 Quality Management System certificate. So meaning that Standards Organization of Nigeria also comes to regulate us because we have that certificate. We also subscribe to Society for Healthcare Safety. We are subscribed to their membership, so they come in for audits from time to time. So there are such, depending on the level of practice. We again for our practice, we service expatriates. We service multinational organizations, multinational companies. They have their own set of levels of requirement, which the average radiographer may not need. But if you want to now do business with this caliber of organizations, you also need to meet certain levels of standards. So we have to, add up from what is basic to what is now required to meet specific target businesses. So that's the way it goes, really.
Oh, nice. Prof, we'll be coming to an end of this conversation shortly, but I still have just one or two more questions to ask you.
Okay.
So what do you think is the future of healthcare business in Nigeria? And then also, can you just highlight briefly why some businesses are struggling? I can see, well, we have seen, in the past, people owning sonography centers, and within few years, they say, well, we can't cope anymore, even when there are no competitors within. So what is really happening, and what is the future of healthcare business in Nigeria?
Okay, well, let me say generally that many businesses are struggling, or even oil companies are struggling. So struggling businesses is a little bit more universal as we speak, because of the effect of the pandemic and recessions going higher and there, high levels of inflation, and in recent times again the war between Russia and Ukraine had worsened the energy crisis and had brought a lot of suffering on burden on businesses. So we are having a high cost of production. We're having a high for radiography, of course, we also have a high level of attrition. Workers leave at will. You employ a radiographer today, train that radiographer. Within 1 year, he gives a resignation, he's leaving for England. So you start afresh again. Then, of course, high cost of providing power is a huge challenge. Multiple taxation. I've told you all the agencies that I mentioned. Every one of those agencies you don't register without paying huge sums of money. So if you have to pay all of this just to start a business and you're not getting enough in terms of patronage, then obviously you're going to shut down. Then if we try to relate it more to radiography as a profession, we also have issues that do basically deal with poor training. A lot of people just feel what it takes to open up a center is the fact that you have learned how to scan or you graduated and you have a certification. That is not enough. Yeah. We need to distinguish clinical practice from business. Absolutely. Everybody that has a skill can do clinical practice, but it's not everybody that can run a business, because there are tenets of business. There are background knowledge that you need to have. So a lot of people who are actually setting out on their own lack experience. You see people 2 years post-graduation, they're already setting up a business. I graduated in 1992 and I set up my business in 2001. That's almost 9 years after graduation. 9 years provided me with opportunity to try my hands with other people, get to know how things work before you start. So there's also issues of fiscal indiscipline. When you start scanning and you make a little money, your hair starts swelling, you enter the market and you start enjoying. So when radiology is a highly capital-intensive business, once that machine breaks down, you don't have enough money to replace it, and then you go under. So these are, in brief, some of the major challenges. Now we talk about future of healthcare business. The future is bright, but I can tell you, under the conditions that we operate, it is actually very, very difficult. It's really difficult. We are barely making ends meet because the cost of production is extremely high. Just this month alone, in one center, my cost of diesel for this month was 5.3 something million naira. Diesel alone in one center, and I have 5 centers. So can you imagine how much diesel, if I need to calculate in various branches, how much we spend on energy alone? And that is not NEPA, it's not PHED or the public power supply. So that is a huge challenge. If government can fix power, if government can also deal with the issues of insecurity, because that is limiting practice, it's limiting investment. For the past 2 or 3 years, I've stopped investing in, further in healthcare because of uncertainty of the environment. And so you don't want to take a bank loan and the next moment everybody's running. If you run, bank will not forget your loan. They will still come back to you. So these are challenges. Fixed power, fixed electricity, reduce multiple taxation, and actually create a good and enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Yeah. If that is done, I can tell you, healthcare business still has a big future because, like I said, we are a country of over 200 million Nigerians, and every Nigerian needs some sort of healthcare. And who is going to provide this healthcare is me and you. And can we provide it if we don't have the resources? The answer is no. So the potentials for growth are very high, but the conditions that can nurture the growth is what is lacking. I do hope that somebody is listening, and maybe at some point we'll get it right in terms of governance, in terms of providing conducive environment, in terms of making things work, and smooth support for small scale and medium scale enterprises in which a lot of radiography practices will fall in.
Thank you so much, Prof. Do you have any closing remarks?
Well, I would just say there's no easy way, out of the problem. If we all leave the country, and go abroad, our uncles and mommies and daddies, they are still here in Nigeria. They will need x-rays, they will need scans, they will need lab, they will need doctors. Absolutely. So somebody has to attend to them. Yeah. I hope that Nigerians in the diaspora would also rise to the clarion call by pulling resources together, because it's pretty easy. You can imagine if 5 radiographers who are based in England pull their pounds weight into one pool and decide to set up a quality practice. They will have a lot of facilities available, and with best practices in place, they will also make good money. So I am encouraging the younger generation of radiographers not to deter, not to be indifferent, not to lose hope. We are in a good profession. We are good for a good deal. Things might not be perfect right now, but there is hope. And if we keep trusting God, the elections are coming. Let's all troop out, elect the right kind of leaders who can make things work for the generality of our people. And then again, I would thank you for the opportunity to speak on your platform. I do hope I was, insightful enough that this interview was actually, it served the purpose for which you set out to do it. Thank you, Evan, for having me.
Thank you so much, Prof. You have been an absolute help, to this topic. You've really done justice to it, and I'm sure people watching or people who will eventually get to see this video will do the same as well. Thank you, sir, for coming on board, and
thank you
ahead.
Thank you for having me, and do have a good day and a wonderful time ahead. I wish you all the best.
All right, sir. Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Turn on the notification button so you see my next videos.